Hello, I'm Josh Lowman, and welcome to Alaskan Filmmakers, a program dedicated to the many talented individuals working in the Alaskan film industry. Like many Alaskan filmmakers, our next guest obtained his early production experience outside the state. Since coming up to Anchorage, he has worn many hats on various productions throughout his career, most recently acting as assistant director and production coordinator for both local and out-of-state films. Alaska Filmmakers is pleased to welcome today's guest, J.R. Foster. J.R.?
How are you today?
Good, awesome. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, let's hear a little bit about yourself. What got you into production?
I first started becoming interested in film in the 80s. A long time ago, my grandfather had a little workshop in the back of his property, and I lived with my grandparents. And he would allow me to go to garage sales and buy things like VCRs and old cameras, and he would help me fix them up so that they would work again. And then we would stack those and we'd make our own little productions. And so as a kid, as time went on, I made several little short films, and I always had an interest in, the industry. Then later on, I moved out of my parents' house, moved up towards Seattle, got involved in the street art community around in there, and a lot of up-and-coming young artists were shooting on 16mm at the time, and got involved with a couple little groups that put on some short productions that got to play at places like the King Cat Theater in Seattle, things like that. And then a little later on, I attended classes at the Academy of Arts University in San Francisco, and learned a bunch about the production end, the back end of how everything wraps up and finally makes it out to, an actual production that's available for broadcast.
In those early films that you were working on, were you ever in front of the camera or were you strictly behind?
Always behind the camera. I'm a behind the camera type of guy. I'm always interested in the technical aspect of how the film is made, not necessarily the actors that were in front of it. I was the camera geek or the lighting geek or the sound geek, and I wanted to know how all of those aspects came together to paint one picture.
After film school, what was your start from there? What was your first job after that?
I did a lot of corporate video. After film school, I wasn't quite ready to get into the art scene around town yet, and so I started picking up some odd jobs with some of the larger corporations in town and doing a lot of internal training videos, mostly internal corporate videos. And then after that, I started getting back into cameras again. I really liked cameras, and I purchased a new digital camera, a new HD camera, but I didn't like what I got out of it, so I built a new lens adapter for it that allowed me to put Canon lenses on the front of my static lens HD camera. And then it was actually that particular lens set that got me involved with most of Anchorage. I went out running around with it one day and ran into director Michael Bergstrom. And Michael Bergstrom was just fascinated by the new camera mount that I had built, and ever since then, that was probably 6 years ago, ever since then I pick out certain productions that I want to work on each year, and I'll take time off from work and I'll work on 2 or 3 films each year, and keep my reel going from there.
Do you do a lot of that? A lot of modified equipment? I mean, that sounds actually really amazing to build a lens mount that converts. I mean, I've seen them made before, but to make your own, I mean, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun project. I always love I always love the fact that my wife is very understanding and very supportive of my film efforts. So she'll let me turn the garage into a little factory for a couple months where I'm building a lens adapter, and I don't want to be disturbed. So she always is the one that helps out a lot. But it all goes back to my grandfather. My grandfather, to me, was just an electronics genius. And at age 7, I'd be sitting in his shop soldering stuff. And so that has progressed throughout my whole life. Even in my normal 9-to-5 job now as a telecommunications engineer, I still go back to the early days of sitting in my grandpa's shop playing with that audio video equipment, just to make all the old stuff work.
You'd said that kind of brought you back to Alaska. What was your first job when you came back to the state?
Well, actually, I was born out of state, and I moved to Alaska in '96. And during that time, I actually came up to Alaska to do some other jobs. I thought I was going to be a gold miner. And I did work heavy equipment and worked in gold mining for a little while. But it was while I was doing that, I was working at the Alyeska Prince Hotel, and there was a Jeep commercial that came up. And nobody had ever worked on a film there, and I had actually had a little bit of film experience prior to that time. So I got to come in and help out with the camera crew. And we had to move a Jeep from the lower parking lot up to the middle of the mountain using some of the snowcat equipment so they could drive it around. And I remember that day I was a PA on the set on this TV commercial, and from that day on I just always kept trying to get on to another one and another one and another one.
Do you think there's going to be a time when that becomes your full-time job, when you're no longer doing something else, you're just making film?
Yes, I have a little bit of a different plan than a lot of people in the industry right now. I am really into film for the art. I love the art of filmmaking, and I want to hone my skills as a director. And so for the last 4 years I've been picking up AD jobs, so that and an AD comes in and they basically run the crew, and they make sure that the director can get his vision out and avoid any conflict or any of the actual production logistics that are needed to make the film happen. And by continuing to work as an AD, not just in the past but in the future, I'm going to keep honing my skills, but getting to see the different styles and the different methods that are used by all these different directors. And working on set is far more valuable than the lessons I learned in school for how to do all of these things. You can do it 100 times in your textbook or in a student film, but then when you get out in the middle of nowhere in Alaska, absolutely nowhere, and there is no local store to bring in support, that's where you start to hone the true filmmaking skills, and that's where you start to become creative, and you find ways of making things happen that you wouldn't normally do on a film set.
Since you did start kind of back before the big advent of more video, did you ever get a chance to work on more film, and do you kind of notice a difference between the film and the video?
Yes. A lot of my past film experience was solely because of a friend whose dad had 16mm cameras, and he would process our film for us. And he taught us a lot about how to match up our optical sound strips up with the 16mm and how to actually cut. But while I love film, I absolutely love the look of film, I prefer the back-end process of video and of digital. So once we could move into non-linear editing and do it all on the back end on a computer rather than having to sit at a cutboard all day long, that's when I really started to get sparked into my interest in it. So while a lot of filmmakers really gravitate towards the film, I gravitate more towards the digital. And I'm really excited about nowadays because the last film that I got to work on, we had an Arri Alexa on set. And the image quality of that camera was just amazing compared to any of the digital that we've worked with before. And that today, now, I really feel that we can start to get out the things that a lot of filmmakers want to, or were limited to on film. We can start getting those out in digital now, and you'll start to see even better progression of what you can do with an image on the screen.
Since you are focusing more on art, does that kind of lead to the type of productions you look to work on, or are you just, if it looks good, you're doing it, or are you kind of limiting, saying that's a production that I really want to do because of what they're doing and the artistic qualities of it?
I definitely do. I limit each one of the productions that I go on after I read the script and after I get to know the producers and the director, because the AD is the director's right-hand man. You have to be able to be flexible to all of the different directors' styles that are out there. But since I'm not trying to make this my every single day job, I do pick out just the scripts that I like each year. And I typically focus under the modified low budget films and lower, which would be under $1 million and lower. And the main reason for that is because on a film set that's $1 million and less, you have the opportunity to help shape the film. Most of the crew does. On a production that's usually over $1 million, you have a place and you come in to your job and you do that every single day, and everybody knows their place and everything falls in, the production happens. But under $1 million, you get the opportunity to actually provide input. And as an AD, I get to say, well, since it's such a low budget, we may not have enough people in the art department to dress a set. So I get to come in and help dress a set, or I might get to come in and help with the makeup department apply because we just don't have enough makeup artists that day. So you get to bounce around and you get to learn all of the aspects of the entire filmmaking process, and you can be in each one of the little groups without interfering with somebody else's job. Whereas if you're on a giant set, that doesn't happen. Union sets, you're basically locked in.
What kind of films would you like to make personally? You said earlier that you would like to transition to actually directing your own work at one point. What kind of films do you want to make?
Right now, I typically get pulled into the modified low budgets for horror. I do a lot of either suspense or horror or monster movies. I do a lot. And I do have a fair amount of background in makeup as well. And so a lot of directors know me for showing up on set with buckets of blood, being the AD that, you know, here I am with 2 5-gallon buckets of blood, and I'm also the AD. You know, so, but I keep laughing because I want to make comedies. I like making comedies, and so I think once I start transitioning more into directing, my first genre that I will start to tackle will be the comedies. And then after that, I think I'll move back into suspense, the stuff where I, you know, placed all my roots.
So what's your impression of the Alaska film industry right now?
The Alaska film industry is in a great position right now. It's in a great position for both large productions and for small productions. The large productions right now are bringing a lot of the equipment and the talent and the professionals into town, and some of them are staying, and some of them are going back. But it's that slow trickle in of some of these larger productions that are helping facilitate some of the smaller productions that are coming into town. And just the tax incentive itself has really started to bring in a lot of the lower budget productions because they can get such a quick turnover on their investment. As an example, the last production that I was on was originally slated to shoot in Canada. They were going to shoot in Vancouver. And after a little bit of research, they found that the tax incentive up here, they could make it for considerably cheaper in Alaska than they could in Vancouver. So within, it was like 1 month of pre-production, they completely flopped their entire production and came up to Alaska to shoot up here. And it's those unique opportunities that the tax credit's giving us that allows for a lot more professionals to find different productions that are coming up around town, and it's offering a lot more work.
Have you noticed a difference between working with, like, say, a local Alaskan production and people that come up from out of state?
The main differences between out-of-state productions and in-state productions would be whether or not the director that's coming in has an experience of working on a studio or on a studio-funded set versus working as an independent filmmaker. I usually find the directors that come in with set and studio experience are very locked in to doing things, like I was saying earlier, the union way, where you have one job and that's the only thing you do. In Alaska, a lot of people wear a lot of hats on sets, and you'll find that directors, a lot of the time, while they'll hire an AD, they won't have an AD do their full job. And to elaborate, the main AD's job is to run the production set, including scheduling the entire shoot and making sure that all of the things that are needed, including props and talent and transportation, is all arranged and pre-set up ahead of time. Alaskan directors, the AD and the director will start to split up a lot of those. The director may do the entire schedule himself, and the AD may not do any of it, but he'll help keep to the schedule and keep the production running. Whereas directors out of LA, they expect that you're going to have, they expect that you're going to have 2 prep days, and after those 2 prep days, you're going to have your script broken down, you're going to have your 4-board that's created, you're going to have all of your set schedule done before you even walk on the set. And then you and the director collaborate, and you get together, and you make the rest of the film. As the Alaska film sets, they're just a lot more, everybody is so willing to try to do everything to make sure that that film is done. Whereas a lot of the LA film sets, you'll do your part, and you want to and you'll keep the truck moving, but you're not as influential on the overall outcome, I guess you could say, as you do in Alaska.
With the local productions doing more and allowing the AD to do more, do you find that more preferential to be able to kind of influence the set as a whole and influence the production?
First off, one of the main reasons why I work as an AD is because I'm very opinionated. And the AD is typically one of the loudest guys on the set, and you can hear me coming from a mile away when I'm working. And working as an AD in general allows you to start sculpting the script and helping the director find that vision. That's one of the main reasons why I work as an AD, but on top of that, working on small productions in Alaska, you get more than just what the normal AD would get to have as input. You may be the only carpenter on set. You may be the only makeup artist on set and also be the AD. So now you're not just helping shape the director's vision of the way it's going to come out, but you're applying the makeup so that you're giving a look to it, and then giving that to the director to help apply to his vision as well. So you get to wear all of those multiple hats, whether it be lighting, makeup, stage, anything, wardrobe, and all of those aspects get to come together in the smaller productions to make an overall look. On the larger productions, the AD gets to really have an influence, but on the small productions, you are the guy. You're the guy that's helping, and each person on that film set is the guy for their particular department. If there's only one person, then there's one person in transportation, that's it. Or one person in makeup, sometimes two. And so those people, each one of them that are fulfilling their goal, they are the key for their department, and they are the whole department. So just running that whole department as by themselves, they get to have a lot more influence than they would working as an assistant or an assistant to somebody else.
What kind of advice would you have for anyone else looking to become a filmmaker?
You have to start looking around. And once you notice other filmmakers, you have to make it a point to yourself to try to get to know those other filmmakers. Because this industry, whether it's in New York, California, or here, it's all about connections. The way that I typically end up on a job is because, or at least a lot of the California productions that come up here to shoot, is by producers' word of mouth. I'll get a call from a producer one day, and they'll say, well, producer so-and-so, the last producer, said that you were great, and we need a new AD. And it's just that word of mouth that just keeps going. And so getting out and getting involved in the community, finding productions, looking on things like Craigslist, looking on the Alaska Films, different websites around Alaska to try to find the different positions, applying for positions, and most of all, just being a PA, a production assistant on sets, just getting in there, even if you're not getting paid for it, it's making those connections with the people that are on set that will slowly start to transition into a job for you.
Great. Thanks so much, JR.
Thank you.
That's all the time we have for this episode of Alaska Filmmakers. We'd like to thank our host, Out North Theater, and our guest, JR Foster. If you're interested in contacting JR or learning more about his production experience, please visit alaskafilmmakers.com. That's all the time we have for today, and remember, everyone has a story to tell.